Sierra snapped the moment she walked into the will, reading, tossing the keys to Dad's vintage Porsche onto the table like she already owned it. She did not apologize for being 20 minutes late. She did not even look at me. I just sat in the corner, silent, staring at my phone and counting the seconds until the wire transfer notification popped up to confirm the trap had snapped shut. I leaned back in the leather chair, letting the silence of the conference room wash over me. It felt heavy, suffocating. It felt exactly like the air in the lobby of Silver Meadows 2 years ago. That place was not a home. It was a warehouse for the inconveniently elderly, painted in cheerful yellow to hide the smell of industrial bleach and decay. I stood outside the locked glass doors, watching my father. He was 20 feet away, slumped in a wheelchair, staring at a blank television screen. He looked smaller than I remembered. Fragile. I reached for the door handle. The security guard did not even look up from his phone. He just tapped the glass with a heavy ring. There was a piece of paper taped there, right at eye level. It was not official stationery. It was a printer paper notice, laminated in cheap plastic. It read, "No visitors for Resident Vance. Per guardian instruction. Sierra Vance." I called her right there in the lobby. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear the clatter of brunch plates in the background. I told her I was at the facility and asked her to let me in. She told me to go home, her voice bright and bored. She claimed Dad got agitated when I visited and said it was bad for his heart. I told her I hadn't seen him in 6 months. She laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. She told me she had just left him an hour ago. She said he did not ask for me. He asked for his phoenix. That is what he calls her now. She said he believes she is the only one who rose from the ashes of this family to make something of herself. I watched my father through the glass. He shifted, looking toward the door, searching for something. For someone. Sierra continued, her voice dropping to a theatrical whisper. She told me he thinks I abandoned him. She said she had to tell him the truth, that I was too busy counting my pennies to drive out there. She said I was just a ghost to him now and told me to let the man die in peace with the daughter who actually matters. The line went dead. My reflection stared back at me from the glass door, pale, tired, locked out. The guard finally looked up, his face softening into pity. He reached for the lock release. I shook my head. Pity would not save my father. It would not fix the rot in my family. I walked back to my 10-year-old sedan. I sat in the driver's seat, the engine cold, my hands gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I did not scream. I did not cry. I reached into the back seat and pulled out my laptop. I opened a new spreadsheet and typed a single file name. The audit. They broke me that day in the parking lot. But they forgot that broken things have sharp edges. Marcus cleared his throat and opened the thick cream folder in front of him. He started to announce the reading of the last will and testament, but Sierra steamrolled him. She leaned forward, her elbows digging into the polished mahogany, invading his space. She told him to skip the preamble. She said she knew the broad strokes, that she gets the ranch and the accounts. She demanded immediate access to the liquid operating funds. Marcus paused, his face a mask of professional patience, and tried to explain standard probate procedure. Sierra snapped that she did not care about procedure. Her voice was climbing, cracking just a little at the edges. She claimed to care about asset protection, saying the ranch bleeds money every day it sits idle. She demanded authorization to move funds today by 5 o'clock. She sounded authoritative. She sounded like a serious businesswoman making a tough call. But I knew better. I sat there and watched the vein pulsing in her neck. I watched her hand tremble as she reached for her water glass. She was not worried about the ranch. She was terrified of the calendar. I knew her finances better than she did. While she was busy blocking my number and playing gatekeeper at the nursing home, I was tracking her digital footprint. It was not hard. Sierra lived her life online, tagging locations and flaunting purchases. I knew about the balloon payment. $20,000. That was the lump sum due today on the business loan she had taken out to lease that G-Wagon parked outside. It was not a business expense. It was vanity on wheels. And at 5 in the evening today, if that wire did not hit the lender's account, the repo order went live. Her phone buzzed against the table. A single, short vibration. Sierra flinched. Her eyes darted to the screen, then away. It was not a condolence text. It was a warning. She turned her head and finally acknowledged my presence. She looked at me like I was a stain on the upholstery. She reached into her purse, pulled out a checkbook, and told me she knew why I was really there. She thought I wanted a payout. I told her I was there to hear our father's will. My voice sounded strange in the room, calm, low, steady. Sierra scoffed. She scribbled something on a check, ripped it out with a violent tear, and slid it across the table toward me. $5,000. She told me to take it. I looked at the check. It was drawn on an account I knew was overdrawn. She called it severance pay. for being a disappointment. She said Dad did not want me there, that he told her 1,000 times she was the only investment that paid off. She leaned back, crossing her arms, looking satisfied. She thought she had won. She thought she could throw pennies at me and watch me scramble. She told me to take the money and leave, to go back to my little apartment and my spreadsheets. I did not touch the check. I did not blink. I told her I would wait. Sierra rolled her eyes and turned back to Marcus, telling him to read the damn thing, but to make it fast because she had a wire to send. She had no idea. She was worried about a $20,000 debt. She should have been worried about the pen she just used to sign her own destruction. Sierra tapped her phone screen, initiating the wire transfer that would save her car. She exhaled, a long, dramatic sigh of relief. She thought she was a genius. She thought she had maneuvered her way out of a tight spot by leveraging assets she hadn't even received yet. She didn't know the money in her account didn't come from the ranch. It came from me. 48 hours ago, I sat in my kitchen and stared at my banking app. I had a 401k I'd built over 10 years. I had a rainy day fund. I had stocks. I liquidated all of it. Every cent. I scraped together $50,000. It was everything I had. If this went wrong, I wouldn't just lose the ranch. I'd be destitute. But in my line of work, we call this calculated exposure. You bet the farm when you know the other guy is bluffing. I didn't approach her myself. Sierra would never sell to me. She'd burn the money first. I used a proxy, an old colleague from the risk management division, a guy who looked like a shark in a three-piece suit. We set up a shell entity called Vulture Capital LLC. He met her yesterday morning at the Gilded Bean, the only coffee shop in town that charged $8 for a latte. I was parked across the street, watching through the tinted windows of my sedan. Sierra sat on the patio, wearing oversized sunglasses, looking like she was holding court. My proxy slid the contract across the table. Assignment of interest. The terms were predatory. We offered to buy her entire share of the inheritance estimated at $1.2 million for a fast cash advance of $50,000 today, with the remainder held in escrow until probate cleared. It was a terrible deal. A smart person would have waited 2 weeks. A solvent person would have laughed. Sierra grabbed the pen. She didn't read the fine print. She didn't ask about the escrow release terms. She just saw the $50,000 upon signing clause. She saw the solution to her repo problem. But she couldn't just sign it. She had to perform. I watched through my windshield as she propped her phone up against the sugar dispenser. She started a live stream. I pulled up her feed on my phone and listened to her voice broadcast in real time. She told her followers she was there with her investment bankers, structuring the liquidity for the estate. She said you have to be aggressive in this market and can't sit around waiting for permission. She picked up the pen, waving it for the camera. She mocked me, saying I was probably somewhere reading a rulebook right now. She said I thought playing it safe got you ahead. She called me a worker ant and herself a phoenix. She signed the paper with a flourish. 8:50 in the morning. She handed the document back to my proxy. He wired the $50,000 to her account instantly. She ended the stream, looking smug. She thought she had just secured her lifestyle. She thought she had outsmarted the system. She had no idea that by signing that piece of paper before the official distribution, she had just walked into the kill box. Back in the conference room, Sierra put her phone down. She looked at me, her eyes full of pity. She told me not to worry, that she would make sure the estate sent me a calendar so I knew when to move out. I looked at the folder sitting next to my elbow. Inside was the document she signed yesterday. The ink was still fresh. I thanked her and told her I appreciated the heads up. Marcus picked up the heavy cream folder again. The room was so quiet I could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Sierra was tapping her fingernails against the table. A frantic staccato rhythm. Marcus began to read The Last Will and Testament of Harold Vance. Sierra sighed loudly and told him to just get to the numbers, claiming we all knew the split 50-50 on the cash and the ranch goes to her. Actually, Marcus said, his voice flat. He said he was going to start with Article 4, Section B. He looked up, his gaze locking onto Sierra. Line 12. Sierra stopped tapping. She frowned and asked what line 12 was. Marcus said it was a spendthrift and forfeiture clause. He adjusted his glasses and began to read. To protect the estate from potential creditors and ensure the longevity of the family assets, any beneficiary who attempts to sell, pledge, encumber, or assign their interest in this estate prior to the official distribution date shall be deemed to have disclaimed their inheritance in full. He paused, letting the words hang in the air like smoke. He continued, stating that in such an event, the forfeited share shall pass immediately to the remaining beneficiary. The silence in the room changed. It wasn't heavy anymore. It was sharp. Sierra laughed. It was a nervous, high-pitched sound. She waved a hand dismissively and said it was just standard legal boilerplate because Dad was always paranoid about lawyers. She insisted nobody sold anything. She looked around the room, inviting us to share the joke. Her eyes landed on me, expecting me to be confused, or maybe just passive. She asked if she was right, noting we were just sitting there. She believed she was safe. In her mind, she hadn't sold anything. She had just signed a piece of paper for a cash advance. The rest of the money was sitting in an escrow account, waiting for the probate court to stamp the final papers. In her world of loopholes and gray areas, she hadn't technically transferred the asset yet. She didn't understand the law. She didn't understand that the act of signing the assignment of interest, the act of pledging her future inheritance for present cash, was the trigger. She didn't need to hand over the deed to the ranch. She just needed to sign her name on the promise. And she had done it at 8:50 in the morning. She repeated that nobody sold anything, her voice a little too loud, and suggested we move on to who gets the house. Marcus didn't turn the page. He just looked at me. I reached for the folder sitting next to my elbow. Actually, Sierra, you did. My voice cut through the room like a scalpel. It was the first time I'd spoken since we sat down. Sierra whipped her head around, her eyes narrowing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't glare. I just slid the thin blue folder across the mahogany table. It stopped inches from her manicured hands. I told her to open it. She hesitated. For a split second, the mask slipped, and I saw the fear underneath. She knew she had secrets. She just didn't think I knew them too. She flipped the cover open. It wasn't a thick stack of legal arguments. It was 2 pages. The first was a screen grab of her live stream from yesterday, timestamped 8:50 a.m. The second was the document she had signed while mocking me to her followers. Notarized assignment of interest. I asked her if she recognized that signature. I told her she should, since she live-streamed herself writing it. Sierra stared at the paper. Her face went pale, the makeup standing out like chalk on a sidewalk. She stammered that it was just a loan agreement, a cash advance, and that it didn't mean anything until the probate cleared. I told her to read the header. She didn't want to. She did anyway. Assignment of interest. I read for her. I told her she didn't take a loan. She sold her rights. She sold her entire claim to this estate to Vulture Capital LLC for a $50,000 down payment. I leaned forward. I told her that by accepting that wire transfer this morning, by signing that affidavit swearing she had the right to sell before distribution, she triggered line 12. Marcus adjusted his glasses. He looked at the document, then at the will. He nodded once. A judge wouldn't even need to deliberate. It was a mathematical certainty. He stated that the forfeiture clause is explicit. Any attempt to assign interest prior to distribution disclaims the inheritance. He told her she sold her share, and in doing so, she legally rejected the bequest. Sierra whispered no. She grabbed the paper, crinkling the edges. She said it was a trick and that she didn't mean to. She offered to give the money back, to wire it back right now. I told her it was too late. The breach happened the moment the ink dried. She looked up at me, her eyes wide, panic finally setting in. She hissed, asking who Vulture Capital was. She threatened to sue them and tell them I set her up. I told her she couldn't sue them. I reached into my purse and pulled out the corporate registration card for Vulture Capital. I placed it gently on top of her trembling hands. I told her it was because Vulture Capital is me. The air left the room. Sierra stared at the card. She looked at me like I had just grown a second head. I told her I liquidated my savings and bought her share. I told her she sold our father's legacy for the price of a luxury SUV because she couldn't wait 2 weeks. I asked her if she thought she was the phoenix rising, then told her she just burned the nest down with herself inside. She stood up so fast her chair tipped over, crashing against the floor. She screamed at me, her composure shattering, accusing me of stealing from her and claiming it was her money. I corrected her. I said it was her money, but now it is just a breach of contract. She looked around the room, desperate for an ally, for a loophole, for anything. She found nothing but Marcus's stone face and my cold stare. She had sold a multi-million-dollar future for a check that wouldn't even cover her credit card debt. And she had signed her name to it. Sierra lunged for the papers, her nails scratching against the polished wood. She was screaming now. A raw, ugly sound that echoed off the glass walls. She threatened to sue me, to drag this out for years, screaming that I set her up and that this was fraud. She was hysterical. She grabbed the affidavit and tried to rip it, but Marcus caught her wrist. His grip was firm, professional. He told her not to destroy evidence, warning her that it was a felony. She pulled back, her chest heaving. She screamed that I wouldn't see a dime, that she would tie the estate up in litigation until we were both dead, and that she would tell everyone I tricked her. I told her to go ahead. I reached into my bag again. I pulled out the second folder. This one wasn't thin. It was heavy. It landed on the table with a dull thud. I told her to sue me, but suggested she might want to look at this before calling her lawyer. Sierra stared at the folder. She didn't want to touch it. I told her to open it. She flipped the cover. It wasn't a contract. It was a stack of bank statements. Hundreds of pages. Dense with numbers. But they weren't just black and white. They were covered in red ink. I told her Marcus gave me access to the accounts yesterday as the new executor. I told her I stayed up all night cross-referencing Dad's medical expenses with her credit card bills. I pointed to a highlighted line. November 14th. $5,000 withdrawn for physical therapy. The same day her credit card shows a $5,000 charge at Gucci. I flipped the page. December 2nd. $3,000 for specialized medication. Coincides perfectly with her weekend at the spa in Vail. Sierra stepped back, shaking her head. She stammered that she was his guardian and deserved a stipend. That it was compensation for her time. I told her it wasn't a stipend. It was theft. I stood up, leaning over the table. $180,000, Sierra. Over 2 years. I told her she drained his nursing home fund to pay for her handbags and her lifestyle. I told her she let him sit in a budget facility, staring at a wall, while she spent his care money on validation. She opened her mouth to argue, to spin it, but I cut her off. I asked her about the affidavit she signed today, swearing she had the right to sell. I told her that is wire fraud. The $180,000 theft? That is, elder financial abuse, and tax evasion. I looked at Marcus. He was already holding his phone, his thumb hovering over the dial button. I gave her 2 choices. Option A. She walks out that door right now, with her $50,000 deposit. She uses it to pay off her repo man and her credit cards. She signs a waiver relinquishing all claims to the estate. And she never contacts me again. Sierra stared at me, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. I continued with option B. I told her I would call the district attorney, hand over the audit, and she would go to prison for 5 to 10 years. The room was silent. Sierra looked at the money in her account. She looked at the red ink on the statements. She looked at me. And for the first time, she didn't see a worker ant. She saw the boot coming down. Her voice broke as she said she couldn't go to jail. Marcus told her to sign the waiver, sliding a single sheet of paper toward her. She picked up the pen. Her hand was shaking so badly she could barely hold it. She signed her name. She didn't look at me again. She grabbed her purse, leaving the keys to the Porsche on the table, and ran out of the room. She had $50,000 in her pocket, but she was bankrupt in every way that mattered. I didn't stay to watch her leave. The moment Sierra was gone, the air in the conference room seemed to change. It wasn't victorious. It was just quiet. Marcus closed the folder. He stated that the waiver is signed and notarized, and that Harbor State Trust Company will take over administration immediately. The ranch title is clear. He slid a small set of keys across the table. They weren't the Porsche keys. They were old. Tarnished brass on a leather fob. He told me my father wanted me to have these. That he knew I'd come back. I took the keys. They were cold in my hand. I walked out of the office and into the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt. I got into my old sedan, the engine sputtering as it turned over. The drive to the ranch took 40 minutes. I turned off the radio. I wanted to hear the tires on the gravel, the wind rushing past the windows. When I pulled up to the main house, the sky was a deep, bruised purple. The house looked exactly as I remembered it: white clapboard, wraparound porch, the old oak tree standing guard in the front yard. But something was different. The silence. For years, this place had been filled with noise. Sierra's demands, my father's booming voice, the constant hum of tension. Now, there was nothing but the crickets and the wind in the long grass. I walked up the steps and unlocked the front door with the old brass key. It turned smoothly. Inside, the house smelled of dust and cedar. I walked through the living room, past the empty recliner where my father used to sit. I didn't feel a ghost. I didn't feel the weight of the past. I walked out to the back porch and sat on the swing. The ranch stretched out before me. Acres of land that were finally safe. I didn't open a bottle of champagne. I didn't call anyone to brag. I just sat there, breathing in the cool night air. My bank account was empty. My retirement fund was gone. But I had the deed. I had the land. I pulled out my phone. I deleted Sierra's contact. Then I blocked her number. Dad didn't leave me a fight. He left me a map. And I followed it home.